Hello and welcome to the Goddess Life podcast, a podcast that aims to connect you to your divine feminine essence while nurturing your mind, body, and spirit in both practical and more magical ways. I'm your host, Cherise Williams, a spiritual guide and author, and I welcome you to the episode today. So this episode I'm really excited about. This is a new segment that I'm going to be implementing on the podcast and YouTube channel. And I really didn't know what to call this segment, but I think I'm just going to call it Coffee Dates. This is kind of just a relaxed vibe, as if you were going to have a coffee date with a good friend and you guys are just sitting down, hanging out, sipping your coffee or tea or water or juice or whatever you want to drink, and just having a conversation, just kind of talking about various topics. So with these coffee date segments, my hope is to bring on different guests and just kind of having a loose general topic. And just kind of having a casual conversation, sharing our thoughts and ideas on these different topics. And my hope is that you guys listening or watching will feel like you're hanging out with us, having a conversation with your friends. So yeah, I'm excited for these. And as conversations tend to go, I'm noticing that these conversations, we start with a general topic and then we kind of branch off into all different kinds of areas, just like normal conversations flow. So before I get into introducing the guest for this first coffee date episode, I would like to remind you, I guess, that if you are watching this video over on YouTube, to hit that subscribe button. I would love it. And also head on over to the podcast, the Goddess Life podcast. It's on iTunes and most podcasting apps. And then vice versa. If you are listening to this on the podcast, give this a subscribe. If you could rate it for me, that would be amazing. And then head on over to the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Cherise1218 and give it a subscribe. Because sometimes I do like this episode. I put it on the podcast and on YouTube, but then other times there's exclusive content just on YouTube and exclusive content just on the podcast. So to get the best of both worlds, subscribe to both the podcast and YouTube. And then you can always also find me on Instagram at CheriseWilliams.xo. That's really where I'm the most active online. All right, so this first episode of our coffee date is with Cory Gunn. Cory was also a guest. I interviewed her a little more formally for the podcast and YouTube, where we discussed all about pendulums. Cory is a pendulum practitioner and creator. She makes the most gorgeous pendulums ever. So if you haven't checked out that episode yet, make sure you go back and check out Pendulums with Cory Gunn. She's amazing. But so our topic was loosely goddesses, because Cory is also a fan of the goddesses, and she does some awesome goddess sessions and goddess education. So I thought it would be fun for us to kind of talk about, like I said, the topic was just loosely goddesses, especially kind of where we both thought deities and goddesses kind of come from. Like, where are they created? Are they, like, where do they come from? So our conversation started out as that, and then it branched off into gosh, we covered all kinds of things: Harry Potter, time travel, pop pantheons, which is pop culture pantheons. So we covered a whole wide array of topics, but it was a lot of fun. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. So grab yourself a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, glass of wine, whatever it is, get cozy, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Talk to you guys soon. Hi, everybody, and welcome to, I don't know what I'm calling this segment. Basically, this is a new segment here on the YouTube channel and the Goddess Life podcast, where we will just be hanging out and chatting with different guests. It's super casual, where we're going to kind of just have a loose topic to go on. And then, yeah, we're just going to kind of hang out and chat about these various topics. And hopefully you guys listening or watching feel like you are just hanging out, part of the conversation too. Yeah, so I'm Cherise Williams, for those of you who do not know me. Sorry, my cat is trying to get into my coffee. And here today for our first little whatever this is called is Cory Gunn. And if you've listened to previous podcast episodes or have seen other videos, we had the pleasure of hearing from Cory when I interviewed her all about pendulums and pendulum usage. Cory is with Wilder Women on YouTube, YouTube. Is that your YouTube channel name also, or is it your name? Okay.
Yeah, it's still a YouTube channel name too. Yeah.
Okay. So it's everything. Instagram, website, YouTube. She also has the Wilder Women's Witches Circle, or is it just Wilder? What is it?
It's just the Wilder Witches Circle.
Wilder Witches Circle. Okay. Which
I
is
wanted to make it a little bit more encompassing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's a monthly subscription, right?
Yep.
Membership thing, and she has so much awesome content. She's like full of so much wisdom. You're amazing. But so I wanted to bring her on for the first whatever this is. And we're going to be talking today. Our topic is goddesses, so just kind of all things goddesses. Yeah. So I guess I don't know, maybe we should share, like, let's start from the beginning. I kind of wanted to talk about both. Like, we could share how we first started maybe working with goddess energy, I guess. And then I also kind of want to go into, because I know everybody has different beliefs on what are goddesses and like where do goddesses come from and like that kind of thing. So I kind of want to touch on that too. So I guess, I don't know, like what was your first experience with goddess, or why do you feel drawn to goddess energy?
I feel like this started really young because I was raised Lutheran, and just the narrative that was given to me didn't always make sense. It didn't quite fit.
It's so masculine heavy.
It is.
You know? And even as kids, when you're not fully aware of the like masculine feminine duality aspect, it's still, I think, a lot of us feel like something doesn't feel right here. It feels off balance, or like, I don't know.
Yeah.
At least that's how it felt for me, the Christian side of things.
It does. And even, if you look at the evangelical and more Lutheran side, at least on the Catholic side, there's a heavy leaning towards Mother Mary and, bringing her energies in. Mm-hmm. And yet, like I said, on the Lutheran and evangelical side, that's kind of stripped away even further, where you're only looking at the Holy Trinity, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God, and just super strong masculine energy right there. And then you're like, well, where's everything else?
Right.
Like, where does the rest of it fit in?
I know, like something's missing.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive. I mean, when you look at a child, even being raised how we used to be raised in large communities, the first thing that you see when you pop out of the womb is your mother, right? You've got this life-giving force right there that is with you before you even enter the world, like you're growing inside of her womb. And that's the first voice that you hear when you develop your eardrums, etc. And like, that's the voice that you always recognize. If, you've got 10 people shouting your name in Walmart and one of them's your mom, you're going to hear your mom and turn around and go, what?
Exactly.
Like, you recognize that voice.
Yeah.
And so, and then you have, all of your parental figures, however your family unit is made up, all of your different parental figures, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, neighbors, again, like it's this huge community. It's this plethora of people that you go to for different things. And so for there not to be this large, epic, polytheistic family, if you will, in the astral realm, just kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
Like I was being raised by a single dad who was all thumbs and didn't really know how to answer a lot of questions. Just the answer was, because I said so. And you're like, why?
Like, I need answers though. That's such a good way to put it. That's such a good way.
The Bible, you flip it through and it's because I said so, because I'm a jealous God, because that's the way I want you to do it. And you're just like, okay, Dad.
Yeah, fine.
Fine.
That is so, yeah, that drives me nuts, because it doesn't make, like, that's one of the things that never made sense to me. Like, Catholicism has its own set of issues, but that is one thing that I did always love about the Catholic Church, and I think why even to this day, like, I love being in Catholic churches. Like, I don't like to sit through Mass, really, but I love to just be in that environment, and I think it's because it always made a little more sense because there was that Mother Mary aspect. So you did have we talked about Jesus in Catholic Church, but then it was also very heavily Mother Mary. And now I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, and it still all never made sense, because, like, you look around the earth, like you said, I mean, we all come from a woman. Like, you need to create any form of life on this earth, except I guess there are, like, some fish and, like, reptiles that can change their sex or whatever, but even then you need to have a male and a female. Plants, flowers, even, you need to have the male part and the female part of the flower to create a new flower. Like, every aspect of life, you need the male and the female, that duality. And then and like in Christianity and I guess other religions that don't have that goddess aspect, it's like, how does that work? Like, it never made sense. Like, how is there just a God who created all of this and made sure that there needs to be a masculine and a feminine to create new life, but he's just himself? No. Like, I don't know. Like, life comes from a female. Like, I don't know. So yeah, it
always kind of felt like, and this is just, from the perspective of a little kid, right? Who, especially at the time growing up in the 80s and 90s, a lot of my friends' parents, would get divorced. And the way that it felt to me, like I said, still drawing on, like, that single dad narrative, was that, mom left. And dad's like, okay, well, I'm going to strip out any mention of this woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, no, I did it all by myself,
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
It just felt like, someone who did have a partner, but then didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Like,
because
let's
it ended badly.
Forget about her. Yeah.
Just
exactly.
Ignore the woman behind the curtain. It's kind of how
pretty much. Yeah.
And when you look at the Hebrew, like the original translation of, the Torah before it from the Old Testament, and the original writings of Genesis, the translation of God was this dual-natured figure that was a combination of masculine and feminine energies, but residing in one vessel. So it was like they completely ignored that part. The further down the line it got and then you just ended up with this, very ominous patriarchal figure who you were constantly trying to live up to the expectations of.
Yeah.
And it felt really counterintuitive with everything in nature. And I think that's where I started really, like, questioning things. And when I came across mentions, and my gateway into it was through Wicca, reading goddess and god both, equal partnership. I think also as well, when you learn about different cultures and religions in school, you learn a little bit about Egyptian pantheon, you learn a little bit about the Greek pantheon, just because of the nature of those cultures and how heavily their deities influence their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I think the fascination really started. And then when I picked up on Wicca of like, oh, well, people actually are worshiping and working with these energies today.
Yeah, like it still happens today.
Oh my God, are you serious?
That's how I felt.
Sign me up. Like,
I remember in elementary school, I did a report on Greek deities. And that's when I first came across Athena, which you and I did a goddess session with Cory. She helped me connect even more to Athena. But yeah, I remember reading the books and I'm like, wow, people don't like think this way anymore. Like, that's so crazy. Like, how do people just not think this way anymore? And then, yeah, years later, when I first discovered Wicca and like witchcraft and paganism and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, people still do believe in this. This is amazing. Like, it literally feels like they always say, like, when people discover like Wicca particularly, but paganism generally, it feels like coming home, because it makes so much more sense, because there is that duality aspect and that connection to nature and everything, and it all makes so much sense.
It really does. And it makes sense because there are so many of us,
Mm-hmm.
and there are so many different, ways that we can be. There are so many sides even to one person. Each and every one of us, even being female, there's a there's a balance of both energies inside of each of us at any given time. I might walk around where, say I'm in a female body, but I might be 60% leaning more towards, masculine energy and 40% feminine energy, whereas there could be a different combination in other people. And I kind of feel that honoring that duality just makes sense from the perspective of seeing it within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at ourselves as extensions of those divine energies, but just in physical bodies, why would we leave a whole other section of ourselves out?
Right? Yeah.
Where did this other bit come from?
Exactly.
To be there? Like,
it is interesting to look at, like, how, I mean, most cultures started out with that duality aspect, leaning almost even more towards the feminine aspect, because they recognize that we come from, the female body, we come from the female energy. So there usually was more of a lean towards the female, but they also acknowledge the male aspects as well. I mean, most cultures, years and years and years ago had the male and the female deities. So it is interesting to see how kind of religion and belief transformed as society transformed, where the men started to be like, you know what, no, we are top dog, we're taking over. It's like throughout the years and generations, as men started to kind of take control, that female spiritual aspect, female deities kind of started to get pushed away and ignored and forgotten. It makes me so mad and sad.
And I think you start to see that in the incarnations of, Inanna and Ishtar and down to Aphrodite, and the importance that she carried in each of those cultures, in the Babylonian and the Mesopotamian, and then finally, her final incarnation in Roman culture. She gets almost downgraded.
Right?
She starts off as this glorious motherhead figure, this matriarchal figure of, she's a battle goddess. She's the goddess of war, the goddess of destruction, the goddess of love, beauty, all things embodied in feminine energy. And this just, because if you look at the mother figure, your own mom is your first visual representation of beauty and grace and love and comfort, but then also, hellfire when you piss her off, and like, sweeping destruction of your life. But just, devotion and forgiveness and, all of these things embodied into one vessel. And she starts off that way. And then it gets scaled back with each civilization, almost as the civilization starts to get more patriarchal. Then, she's just this gorgeous figure at the end, of beauty and love and sex and, this little box.
And then it's almost like they separate it into like, because then you do have the goddess of like war and destruction, and then it's almost like they took all of her qualities and put them into like all these different goddesses, kind of saying like
and
women
gods to some degree.
Yeah.
They switch it because in her pantheon for, you know, we've got Ares or Mars, you know, in the Greek Roman pantheon of war and battle. They just completely take that responsibility away from her and made it masculine.
Yeah.
Because the men rode into battle, you know? Yeah. And then they flip that as well, and we've got a patriarchal lead, you know, in those pantheons in the form of Zeus and Jupiter. Yeah. And so, you know, she's just kind of, you know, off there as Aphrodite, Venus, you know, this gorgeous dog, just hair all pretty, and then everything else that she was responsible for, like you'd mentioned, you know, putting it into other goddesses, you know, her role as the matriarch gets split off and put into Hera, Juno. Her justice aspect gets split off and put into Athena, Minerva. Her, you know, all of these different aspects stripped away from her.
Yep.
So that she's just now this delicate flower who gets, you know, pissy when her lover goes off to look at somebody else.
Right.
And you're just kind of like, you know, not to diminish the power that they actually gave Aphrodite and Venus, because she's still a badass woman.
Yeah.
But you see them chipping away at it until finally, when Rome burns, then it's like, oh, we've got free reign now just to have the one dude.
Yeah.
And everybody else, goodbye. And, you know, like a lush character play just got stripped out to this one person monologue. And you're like, oh, that's not as cool anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I guess
it doesn't feel balanced. It doesn't feel right.
It feels like there was a lot of destruction when that culture went down. And granted, there was a lot of gluttony there that needed to get weeded out. But then we lost the Republic of Greece, you know, when they were overtaken by Rome. We lost the philosophy. Now, granted, Greece wasn't perfect. Ancient Greece wasn't perfect either. It was very patriarchal. You know, women were just there to have babies.
Yeah.
And shut up. And if you had any meaningful relationships, it should be with another man. So, you know, it was like, we're just here for decoration. But it, you know, it felt like they understood the importance of that duality in their pantheon and gave these women more authority and, you know, grace and virtue. But there's still a very heavy patriarchal spin on their stories even.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that pissed me off like no other is one of Athena's stories, actually, the story of Medusa, where she is, you know, this gorgeous woman who is running from a follower of Poseidon, I think it was, ends up in Athena's temple, is raped, brutally raped, left there bleeding. Athena gets pissed, and she then, you know, turns Medusa into a gorgon, like punishes her.
Yeah. That story, I love my Athena, but that story, I'm like, I don't like this story.
I was like, well, and so I'm sitting here thinking about it, and that's one of the things that I almost, maybe you and I can do like a session or something on this, you know, at another time, like do a segue, because one of the things that I want to talk about is what to do, especially now that we're in 2018 and we have this empowering movement, when your matron or patron deity, when a deity that you are working with has a shit backstory or has blemishes in their history that you're just like, ugh, like I could not work with this energy. And how do you reconcile that?
That's a good question.
It's a tough one. But so I was looking at her story, and this is what started me thinking about it, because looking at that story, I'm like, that's not Athena. That's not the Athena I know. There's no way in hell she, being the virgin goddess that she was, and virgin not meaning that she was, you know, celibate, but that she had control of her sexuality.
Yeah.
There's no way I can reconcile a goddess like that punishing a woman for getting raped.
Yeah, it makes zero sense, that story.
I can't reconcile it in my brain.
Yeah.
It feels like, okay, that was rewritten by a man.
Yeah.
and if it really occurred, what I can see happening is Athena going to this woman and going, how do you want me to punish this vile creature that did this to you?
Mm-hmm.
And Medusa holding her back and saying, you know what? I don't just want to punish him. I want to punish any man that looks at me.
Yeah.
Make me a Gorgon.
Yeah.
Like, give me this power. And her going, done.
Yep.
And that's,
that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then saying, okay,
punishing her, like, that never made sense to me. I'm like, no, this is not how this.
This is not how this story went down. I wasn't there back then, but this is not how this story went down.
Exactly. Especially, I think it's important too. Why that's important to personally connect with these different deities, to do meditation, to to leave like offerings for them, and to just to have your own personal connection to them, because then you do start to learn who they really are. It's almost like, if you hear about some person, like, you can't believe everything you hear. You need to get to know this person on like a individual personal level, because you can't believe everything you hear about everybody.
It's a game of telephone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I guess this kind of brings up a good point, or good direction to go in, of like, what are goddesses? What are deities? This is one that I don't know, like, because you're talking about her story, like this happened, this for sure happened. And I don't know, sometimes I lean more one way and sometimes I lean more another. Like, sometimes I think that these deities were actual deities, that maybe they existed on our physical plane, but that they definitely existed, on the astral plane, but that they are these actual, they were created, they were born, and that these stories that we hear are their actual stories. Maybe they happened partly on the physical plane, maybe they also partly happen on the astral plane. So I have that one aspect. Then I also kind of think sometimes that deities are that we birthed them, that we created them. Almost kind of like we, created a story to explain the seasons and to explain different things. And so we created, Athena, since we were just talking about her. So we created Athena to explain these different things. But when you have so many people thinking, thoughts are things, thoughts create things. So when you have so many people thinking of one thing, that it's almost like all of our collective thoughts birthed Athena. And now I'm actually picturing her birthing from Zeus's head. But almost kind of like that, like you have so many people thinking of this one story, of this one character, that it actually makes that character become a real thing on another plane. Yeah. So I don't know, like, I go from one or the other. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think that these were beings that were born, created, and then we somehow connected to them and became aware of them? Or do you think that they're more just kind of birthed from our collective thoughts or energy?
I do. I feel like it's a combination. Mm-hmm. So like in the Celtic belief system and in old Celtic paganistic views, mm-hmm. the set of deities that you're dealing with, especially the Tuatha De Danann, these were actual real people that came over, to Ireland, and we wrote all these stories about them. We wrote their legends down, mm-hmm. to the point where now we've added so much more to them that it's almost like from the inspiration of these real individuals, we then birthed this whole pantheon of deities, where I kind of feel like their energy is partly taken from their human blueprint, but at the same time, they are their own separate beings. Like they are, you know, their own entity, energy, if you will. So many people worshiping and thinking about and looking at the same characters, you know, that it's inevitable that they take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And, you know, from these, we basically have spawned an entire race of beings that have their own personality, they have their own backstory, they have their own, you know, desires and motivations. Some of them might even be a little shady, you know, considering, you know, some of our own ulterior motives are a little shady.
Yeah.
I feel like they're as varied and versed as humans are. But there are some that we have elevated. Like when I look at deities, and we have multiple deities for the same thing. So like if I were to compare, like for example, Persephone being the queen of the underworld in the Greek pantheon, I don't look at her as interchangeable from hell in the Norse pantheon. Like she is, like, I look at those almost as two different underworlds, two different deity, like have completely different stories, completely different motivations for what they do. Even the folks that they usher into their underworlds, completely different. Like, super different. And I don't compare Odin to Zeus, to Osiris, to like, they're all very individual. It's kind of, you know, I kind of feel like we're doing them a little bit of a disservice if we try and do the compare and contrast game a little bit and make them facets of the same being. Now, granted, I look at the gods and goddesses as, yes, facets of the same type of divine energy, but the way that all humans are connected as the same type of universal energy.
Yeah.
But yet we're still living individual lives with consciousness.
And we all have, some of us have similarities and stuff, but we're all individual. Yeah.
Exactly. And yet collectively, we all share like a collective consciousness as well. We're all from the same source, you know, pulled down. So that's kind of how I look at deity as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, from that, it's from the same pool that it gets birthed. But I feel like humans play a huge part in that collective energy birthing a new deity. So give you an example, we kind of don't, like, I kind of feel like we do have a large number of deities that we've birthed in our modern Western world. Just don't call them that. So, for example, the number of people who draw strength and wisdom from Albus Dumbledore.
I was actually going to ask you about your thoughts on kind of like pop pantheons and like we've totally created, like he's his own little deity now. Like I almost feel like our like we've all wanted you know, characters from Harry Potter and stuff to be these real beings that we can connect with. I almost feel like at this point there is an Albus Dumbledore on the astral plane. Like he's there. There's a Hermione and a Harry Potter on the astral plane.
And that if you do a journey to visit Albus, right, and you meet him and he provides wisdom that is no less valid than you or I doing a journey to meet Athena and gaining her wisdom.
Agreed.
Like at this point, millions of people around this globe have contributed their energy to this being. He now exists.
Yeah.
Fully in my mind.
For sure.
No doubt.
Yeah.
He has to.
Yeah.
You know, you can't pour that much energy into something and have it not be there.
Yeah.
You know, at least a foothold. You know, he may not be as strong yet, as Athena.
Yeah.
However, like my kids now know who Albus Dumbledore is. It's gonna go without saying that this is gonna continue for generations.
Oh, for sure.
And with each new generation, he's gonna get stronger.
Yeah.
And because we don't call him a deity, I don't think detracts from the fact that he's really birthed from the same energy that Athena was.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense. I'm sure there's some people probably like, what the hell are they talking about?
You're smoking something. But, looking at it logically, Athena has had stories written about her. Just because, the only thing that gave her validity as a deity, gave her that definition, that bucket, is because we coined that term, mm-hmm. because the society went to her for wisdom, mm-hmm. right? So many people the world over, I think, do look at Albus and other, pop culture icons.
Comic book character like Wonder Woman, Batman, Spider-Man. I mean, yeah, for years people have looked at them like, I got inspired by Batman to, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you were to explain to a 6-year-old kid, if you were to explain to them who Bruce Wayne was, who Batman was, in the same context, the same way, explaining his story, the same way that you would explain Jesus' story, that kid wouldn't see a difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They each have books written about them,
mm-hmm.
stories, backstories, mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Just because one was written 2,000 years ago and one started 60 years ago, almost 70 years now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Really, if you examine it from a historical perspective, there's not really any difference.
Mm-hmm.
There's not. There's just one society that collectively elevated, this
and
individual
gave them the title of God.
Yeah, and gave them, no, this is this person up here.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't yet. But if you look at our culture and how, especially now, comic book heroism is coming to the forefront, becoming more mainstream, becoming more relevant, mm-hmm. people are really associating themselves with the plights of these heroes, mm-hmm. looking to their actions for wisdom even. Mm-hmm. I mean, just looking at Black Panther mm-hmm. and what King T'Challa has done for our society over the last 3 years since he was first introduced, at least in movies. Mm-hmm. Obviously, his character has been around longer than that. But even just seeing him translate onto the big screen, I can't tell you how many kids walked up to my door at Halloween dressed as Black Panther. Mm-hmm. Like that, to kids, this is a real person, mm-hmm. a real figure to look up to. This is their deity.
Yeah. And
if historians 2,000 years in the future were to dig up all of our stuff,
oh, they would totally be like,
it's a pantheon.
Yeah. For sure. They'd be like, oh, clearly they worshipped these.
Right. They made movies out from them, pictures.
Right. Action figures, putting them on display, almost like altars,
Like altars, exactly. And when you devote that much time and energy to something, it takes on a life of its own. It's really hard to try and discredit that. Mm-hmm. Especially for energy workers. So that's why I'm like, you know what? If to you, and I'm looking at books on my bookshelf right now, if to somebody going to the Vampire Lestat gives them power,
yeah,
go for it, man. Yeah. That guy has had so many books written about him. There is a masquerade ball put on every year in New Orleans on Halloween for this fictional character.
Right.
He's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
out there in the astral
He
realm.
exists at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, if that gives you power, go for it. That is no less valid
Yeah.
than reaching out to Isis for assistance, to reaching out to Athena, to Ishtar, to anyone historically who has been labeled a deity. Just because we don't give them that label now doesn't mean that they're any less powerful or any less helpful to you if that's, who if you want to take on your matron as Minerva McGonagall, do it. Like,
yeah, if that makes you feel like a better person and makes you, like, inspires you and, makes you feel complete, like, that's awesome. Go for it.
I'm like, go for it. Like, absolutely. And to some degree, I even see, years from now, people working with those who've passed on most recently, almost in the same capacity as they would other ascended masters. Just because someone connects with David Bowie more than they would with Kuan Yin, I don't know. He's still at least sitting out there waiting for his next journey if he decides to take one. So ask him.
Yeah.
What could happen is he doesn't respond, but hey, reach
okay,
out.
so something like that, like an actual person, like, here's something I've thought of, like, okay, so we'll use David Bowie, for instance. I almost feel like, basically, like, the David Bowie, if somebody starts to think of him as their deity, and they're praying to David Bowie, and, they have a little altar space for David Bowie, I almost feel like it's more, there's David Bowie, the actual person, his soul, and I feel like that's almost kind of moving on, it's doing its own thing, but then we have the David Bowie that we've all, as a collective, created, because the David Bowie as fans and stuff that we've created, and like David Bowie that, performed on stage, I feel like that's a different energy than his actual soul energy, so I don't, yeah. Does that make sense?
I do feel like it separates and takes on a life of its own. So if someone was a prolific enough figure that their imprint on our collective consciousness continues way beyond their passing, then, like, for example, Jesus. I don't know if he stopped incarnating. I don't know if his soul energy continued to reincarnate. It's quite possible that it did. Or if he did ascend enough to where he's just stayed in the astral realm for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious that
the last 2 years?
2000.
You're like, the last 2 years. I'm like, oh. Yeah.
Apparently I need a little bit more coffee.
Me too.
But the last 2,000 years, that, or for the last 2,000 years, he's, just been hanging out in the ether doing whatever, he needs to do. Or if he's had to continue to come back to learn additional lessons, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it's clear that his imprint, his energy, has become its own separate entity. And I feel like, taking David Bowie, and that's kind of like a perfect context, because he even had a stage persona. Like, to me, it would make sense that David Bowie, the soul that resided and lived as David Bowie, would move on, do what it needs to do, but the figurehead of Starman, that we all collectively pour our energy into and go to for wisdom, would kind of just, like Athena, just spring forth from our heads, be there and continue to support anybody that needs to come to him for wisdom and guidance. And I feel like that's even a kind of a fantastic deity to look up to, because he had such a strong balance of both feminine and masculine energy. And you could literally go to that deity for any of the archetypes that he portrayed, be it Starman, be it Jareth from Labyrinth, be it,
which that's kind of funny too. So Yeah, now I'm thinking there's just like 15
multiple personalities. They just like split and
that's his own pantheon. It's the David Bowie pantheon.
There you go.
We have
With
Jared,
all his
we have all
incarnations.
That's hysterical.
Absolutely. That would be
bring all these different David Bowies just like hanging out in a room together. But like that might be.
And they're just like, wait, who's calling us? Who do they need?
Yeah.
Okay, you go up, you know.
Goblin King, it's your turn. Go down.
Yep.
That's so funny.
Which would actually, you know, if I'm thinking about it, kind of be a fantastic visual. I mean, it's just
right.
That's awesome.
I know. About. I want to go hang out in that room.
We have triple goddesses.
Huh?
We have triple goddesses.
Right? Yeah.
Maybe David Bowie. You've got David Bowie, and then you have Starman, and you have the Goblin King, and there's his trinity.
This is amazing. I feel like we just created like the Bowie pantheon. Like we make it like an actual religion now.
And then perfect. We just came out with the Starman Tarot. You can use that to connect to him.
Oh, this is great.
Full altar space. You know, we've already got, you know, 7-day candles with him portrayed. You know, somebody needs to create that and like post it to Pinterest or something, because I think it would just be fabulous.
Ooh, here's something. What do you think about people that are currently living being viewed as kind of like deities or something? Like, I'll just say like Kim Kardashian. Like so many people are inspired by her and love her and look up to her. So what do you think about that? Like, do you feel like there's Kim Kardashian on Earth, and then do you think that we've almost created this energetic deity of Kim Kardashian? Like there's Goddess Kim over in the astral realm, or do you think that that can only kind of happen after the person has physically passed away?
I think there's something to be said for living deities. And I think we kind of actually, you know, not to just continuously bag on ancient Greece, but, you know, pulling from that, I almost view the descendants of, and you can even see this a little bit in the Norse pantheon as well, these sort of half gods. You know, whose one parent, you know, was supposed to be Zeus, and then they were born of a mortal woman, you know, things of that nature, that I feel like these at one point were actually living people and ended up being deified while they were still living. And to justify that, the society said, well, one of his parents had to have been a deity. You know, just to kind of, you know, add to that level of special of these folks, and kind of justify deifying them while they were still alive. These half gods, demigods. And in a way, depending on the level of celebrity status, almost it just in the way that their energy kind of separates out when they pass on, and we end up deifying, you know, these celebrities, and they take on a life of their own. I still think it's entirely possible that during their lifetime they get split. And that energy that gets split off really grows and amplifies. I think we saw that even a little bit with Elvis, with John Lennon, you see it mostly with pop stars. Michael Jackson, referring to him as the king of pop. You know, it's entirely possible that the energy of the king of pop, you know, because we're giving them these labels. That these labels then kind of spiral off and start developing before the person has passed on. And once they have, then I think from there the energy just kind of explodes. And really takes on a life of its own. But I think it's absolutely possible that it starts while they're still alive. Just based on the actions that they take, based on thoughts that people lend to them, the collective energy of the fan base, right? Pulsating. And I think that's why a lot of celebrities end up getting really depressed, kind of.
I was actually going to say, like, I wonder how much that then contributes to kind of the downfall of these celebrities that we put on these pedestals. Like, I'm thinking of like Britney Spears.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I feel like, I mean, I love Britney, but if you've seen like interviews with her, like watch the progression of her career and her interviews and her personality and stuff, it's almost like she's just this like shell of who she used to be. And it's kind of sad. It's almost like we like have sucked out everything that was Britney, and now she's just like residing in our, you know, conscious collective mind and like the astral plane, and we've just left this vessel that was Britney.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, actually.
We add attributes to them too that they may not necessarily have as a person.
Yeah, like the Britney Spears on stage isn't the Britney Spears that you would be like, you know, having a cup of coffee with. So it's like, yeah.
We add to them through our expectations. We take parts of them away. We strip them down. And then they feel like they have to live up to this deified, you know, being.
Yeah.
That looks like them, that talks like them, but is no longer them.
Yeah.
And I even, it's kind of sad. I never really liked him that much, but I kind of feel like it's happening to him, and it's kind of sad. Justin Bieber.
Oh.
I kind of feel like he's going through that same Britney breakdown.
Yeah.
Where, you know, breaks up with a longtime girlfriend, starts dating this other girl, 2 months later gets engaged, then freaking elopes with her. He has a massive public meltdown when the ex-girlfriend goes into rehab. And then it's just like people all around him are telling, you know, these publications left and right that like he has no idea what the hell is going on. He's confused. He doesn't know where his life's going. And this is a kid who's what, like 21?
Something maybe? Like that. Yeah, he's young.
Really, really young. To have to go through this, who has basically been deified, for lack of a better word, since he was 12.
Yeah.
Making YouTube videos.
It's almost like at this point he doesn't even know who he is, because society's put so much of their own opinions and their own views and their own energy into him that, I think a lot of these celebrities begin to don't know who they are anymore because we haven't let them. Oh my gosh, it's kind of so sad. I feel so bad for celebrities.
It's a bummer because that energy's still there.
Yeah.
This collective idea of Justin Bieber and who he is still there. It's spiraling out into the astral.
Yeah.
And yet there's a human being who's fighting against that. He's getting pulled in that direction. But he's like, no, I want to go over here. Like, this is where I should be. But we're dragging him.
Yeah.
Fighting, kicking and screaming in this other pathway. And it's a bummer. So I do think that there's something to be said for living deities because of the toll that our energy, you can see it physically. Yeah. That just our collective consciousness and our expectations, the toll that it takes on the physical body. We are literally trying to pull this kid's energy out, stick it in the astral, and make it a deity. And he's like, I still want to live. Like,
like I'm still here.
Like, I'm still, and it could potentially be why we lose so many celebrities so young. Marilyn Monroe, we lost Elvis. You know, Michael Jackson was still really young. He had to pump his system full of drugs just to wake up and go to sleep every day. That's how much was getting poured into him and taken away from him. Yeah. That I think as a society, we don't look. Energy workers obviously have a different take on it because we see it and we experience it and we acknowledge it. But I don't think society looks at how much of an impact energy and thoughts and just the creative power behind that. just the impact that thousands of people, you know, bigger scale, millions of people across the globe have when they have a singular thought.
Mm-hmm.
They come together and they think of something so condensedly and for so long that it just takes on an absolute life of its own.
Yeah.
We see that, and then we just say, oh, well, that person was weak.
Right.
No, it's, we're powerful. And we should acknowledge how much power we have over other people.
Yeah.
And
craziness.
what we can really do to somebody.
Right.
Put those thoughts and actions into play. Like that's, it's kind of horrifying how much power we have.
It is.
But absolutely, like I think those are perfect examples of the living deity and what we actually can manifest.
Yeah.
Whether or not that was our original intent.
Yeah.
Kind of
also
scary. I'm glad I'm not that good.
It's so weird to think about. It's so weird. And then I wonder too, like how much energy we need to put into like a fictional character or something to have it manifest. I guess technically people say, you know, any thought that you have manifests in a different plane, in a different dimension.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I just kind of wonder like what elevates something to kind of a goddess deity status. You know, like if I write a story and I have this character in my story, you know, I guess some people would say that that character, because you thought that character, it now exists in a different level. Realm. You know, like, is that a goddess? Because I think of it as one and I start focusing on one. Does it become a deity, or does it take, you know, 100 people collectively thinking of this?
That's a really interesting question.
Like, I wonder at what point does it elevate just from like, here's this little blip that I've now put into the universe versus like now it's its full blown own entity. Like, I wonder. I don't know.
I feel like that's kind of in the same boat as what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
Because you could then spin that around and go, was that deity alive all along and they were the one that gave you the inspiration to write about them in the first place?
Didn't even think of it that way.
And they were like, okay,
so
this realm is real. We need a vessel to get out into the world that here's this person. We're just going to download right into your consciousness. Write about me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't even think of it that way. So, oh my God. Yeah. Did Dumbledore already exist?
Somewhere?
Like, I need to be written. Like, yeah. Did this whole realm already exist? This whole Harry Potter world? Oh
and that it was happening.
He just was like channeling it.
Simultaneously, you know, along our timeline, and J.K. Rowling maybe just tapped into that universe, had a download of this story and said, okay, here's what it is. Boom. She may not have gotten like all of the details right, but the majority of it, you know, of the characters and when big things occurred, and you know,
this is just craziness. I've never thought of it this way. I've always thought of it the other way. Like, we create this reality, this world, but I never thought of it as like us tapping into this other world. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of makes, I think as we are.
That kind of makes sense. I mean, because everybody says, like, where do creative ideas come from? Like, where does this come?
Like, maybe the entire Marvel universe does exist as a universe, and the comic writers, you know, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, maybe they were just super psychic and were downloading this stuff like crazy and just writing it all out on paper.
But then, like you said, I mean, then they do take creative liberties with it, or, you know, they get the initial idea and then they're like, oh, let me now take my own spin on it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now I'm even more excited.
Let's bring them there, and you know.
That's the way it happens. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, that almost makes more sense to me than us like coming up with these characters and worlds and us birthing these worlds. I think oh my gosh, you are onto something.
Yeah, maybe they were there all along. And
Yeah.
we were the vessel that birthed them into being in this universe.
Yeah.
It's possible that, you know, each and every one of these worlds that I'm looking at existed somewhere, and because these figures were so larger than life, their energy just kind of perforated that boundary.
Yeah.
And we had this vision of them and said, shit, I need to write their story. You know, and
this is amazing, and this makes so much sense. Like, this is how it happens. This so now I'm of the belief that all of these deities and stuff already exist. It's just it takes us tapping into them.
Yeah.
Although I guess we also do kind of birth deities as well. I think it's both. Actually.
I think it can happen either way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those, I don't know that we'll ever 100% know the answer of where everything came from.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going to get to that spot, but you know what? It could be in a parallel universe. Someone somewhere is writing David Bowie's story as Starman.
Right? Oh my God, that just gave me goosebumps. That's crazy.
And they're going to spiral off and take on a life of its own, and he's going to be a deity in that world as well.
Oh my God. There's somebody writing Labyrinth right now. They're right, or maybe Labyrinth was. They channeled that from another world.
Yeah, and they just used David as the personification of the Goblin King, where Jareth is, you know, had so many more adventures with Toby on the other side.
It's crazy.
Like I have no idea. I have no idea. But you know, that it wouldn't surprise me. I guess at this point, I feel like I've seen enough. Yeah. And that, you know, in another universe, they probably think humans are unfathomable. Yeah. Like, that creature exists? No way. And here we are, you know. I'm also kind of terrified a little bit if I think of it in a horror movie context, that somewhere,
ooh, yeah,
you know, like Aliens was a reality for somebody. Oh. And, you know, Ripley actually did go through all of that crap.
Now I'm thinking of like all of the horror movies.
Yeah, I'm like, kind of glad xenomorphs aren't really here, but if they are for somebody else, like, I'll pray for you, man.
Yeah, some good vibes over to your world, but
yeah, because that sucks.
Yeah.
You know, and really all the big creators in our world are just deeply psychic. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
But it would kind of explain the creative madness of having to write something down, of getting woken up at 2 a.m. and just having to get it out on paper. Yeah. That makes a little bit of sense. And, you know, I could just be spewing off nonsense right now, and this is like not how
it all makes so much sense now. And now I'm like thinking of all these different stories and like different worlds, and like how we always say, like, oh, I wish I could go visit that world. Maybe you can, like, astral travel to that world. I want to go to Hogwarts.
We could probably all end up astral traveling to Hogwarts and having like a grand old time.
Awesome.
And yeah, and I don't think that's any less valid than traveling to the underworld to meet your ancestors.
Ooh.
I feel like, you know.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like, though, because, all right, so, like, Hogwarts, I think, like, we're thinking of as, like, oh, I'd go visit and, like, you know, it'd be kind of like it was in the books. But if you think about it, I mean, I feel like that timeline has progressed. So, yeah, we could go to Hogwarts, but it's not going to be the Hogwarts from the books. It's going to be where it is now, currently. I don't know.
Well,
time travel's different, too, in different realms.
It's kind of interesting because we look at time as linear because that's how we experience it.
Mm-hmm.
When really time is like one dot.
Yeah, and like I can never say that word. Cyclic.
It's cyclical.
Cyclical. Yeah. Thank you. I'm like cyclical. Cyclical.
Okay. Goes in cycles.
Yeah, thank you. Like a big circle. Just keeps going.
Yeah, 100%. So while physical time travel is absolutely not something we're ever going to figure out in our timeline or in our lifetime. I do feel like, to a degree, and here's where I'm going to get really sci-fi here, that it is possible in the astral realm. Like, I do feel that there is a way for you mentally to help heal your past, to do a regression, to go back to a time and redo it in a way, to help yourself heal. And in your mind, you have actually altered your memory, even though you didn't go back in time and actually redo that event. That the lasting effect of you going back and replaying that and having a do-over, a mulligan, you know, of that past event for you is very therapeutic and healing. That we can go visit our past lives, etc. I do feel like when we travel into the astral realm, because in theory, our ancestors, you know, if you believe in reincarnation, you know, whatever you believe in, I do, that my ancestors are walking around right now in other bodies. You know, they're living their lives, they're doing their thing. But I can travel to the underworld to visit whatever essence from that lifetime, that ancestral lifetime, is still there to connect with and to gain wisdom from, to ask questions of. You know, I'm basically talking to that person's higher self, because our higher selves just stay in the astral realm. With the collective consciousness of everything else. And then we download a portion of ourselves into a body and we walk around. But that higher self is kind of who we end up connecting with. So in a way, I do feel like if we wanted to, we could go back to the 1994 Hogwarts and kind of like navigate around and travel around. Like, I could go and, you know, astral project myself to the Vampire Lestat's desert concert back in 1983, you know, and like experience it as though I were there. And, you know, that these moments in time live in the astral realm. We can go visit them. While we don't have a physical impact on that moment, I still feel like we can relive that experience in a way and take wisdom and lessons from it. That energy still, because it occurred, there's an imprint there. So somebody could, in theory, astral project back to Woodstock, you know, and see all of this stuff live. And feel that energy, because so much energy was left there in that area that it carries an imprint in the astral realm forever. And you know, anybody could go back and experience that if they felt called to. I still think that's possible. But you really got to hold on to that, like that energy, and tap into that, and, like, you know, get yourself there.
It's so amazing. It's so crazy to think of, like, what our brains can do. I mean, what is it? We only use like 10% of our brains or something crazy.
Well, I think that's still kind of a misleading number. I don't think we tap into, so I think that was just kind of a way to say that we don't tap into all of the facets of our mental potential. Most of our mental capacity is used to kind of autopilot all of our systems. Exactly, so that we can breathe and we digest, and, you know, it's sending electronic impulses everywhere, but we're not consciously doing it. Like, we don't have to physically be aware of it. And so our consciousness, there's like ton of untapped potential there. And even with our subconscious mind, there's so much that it does that we don't understand how it works. I think if we were able to control that portion of our brain that's just dormant, and be able to switch off with conscious control of our subconscious. Who knows what the hell we would be capable of, you know?
exciting
And
to think of.
It's cool. It's also
It
kind
is.
of frightening.
It is. Well, it's crazy. I know there's like people who can tap into that. Like I'm sure our government and stuff, like I'm sure that there's a lot that they still don't understand, but I'm sure parts of our government, little secret sects of the government, know like how to kind of turn that on and off. And that's a whole other thing. Our government scares me. The secret parts of the government.
Probably do a whole video on that.
I know, which actually, and I was just looking at the time, we should probably. I love this. This is so much fun, and I'm going to have you back, because I love how we started out with talking about goddesses and like goddess worship, and transition to David Bowie existing on alternate planes.
Yeah, we kind of spiraled
and ending
there.
on the government. So that was awesome. I love it. I hope that you guys listening enjoyed this. Let me know. Comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Comment below, and we would love to hear your thoughts. Reach out to us on Instagram if you're watching or listening to this on the podcast. CheriseWilliams.xo on Instagram, and Wilder Women on Instagram. And that's WilderWomyn, correct?
OMB, like womb.
WOMBYN.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put it in the description so people can follow you. But yeah, this was fun. And I hope everybody kind of feels like they were hanging out with us.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to have you back, and we'll touch back on some of the things that we talked about.
Oh yeah, because we could go on for a whole series with some.
Oh yeah. I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody, and we'll talk to you guys later.